Did you know that archaeologists have found 3 million-year-old fossils of roses? Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Join me next as we take a look at a beautiful flower that's been with us for a long time. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. You know, people ask me all the time if I have a favorite flower. And I have to say, no, I don't just have one. There are too many to choose from. But I'll have to say the rose has to rank right up there at the top. So in today's show, I thought we'd take a look at a wide variety of roses as we travel to the American Rose Society headquarters in Shreveport, Louisiana. The collection of roses there is quite spectacular. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. And after that, we'll bring things a little closer to home. I'll take you on a tour of my own personal garden and share all the different varieties of roses I'm growing. And as the summer continues to heat things up, cooking in a hot kitchen doesn't exactly appeal to me. That's why I have an easy summer salad recipe that I can't wait to share. And in my garden, I have this colorful annual popping up not only in containers and beds, but also in arrangements as a cut flower. It's the Gilbert daisy. Aren't the colors just wonderful? Now we'll get to these a little later in the show. But first, let's take a tour down south to the American Rose Society, where the scenery is simply breathtaking. I'll meet you there right after this quick break, so stay with us. So often we've heard that the rose is the most favored flower, not only today but throughout history as well. And what a colorful history it has. Roses are also playing important roles in the design of gardens today, such as using them to accent entries, serve as privacy screens, and even ways to bring structure to the garden. And if you're looking for the perfect rose variety to grow, you may want to visit this beautiful place. Here at the headquarters of the American Rose Society in Shreveport, Louisiana, they're growing thousands of roses in over 100 acres of beautifully landscaped grounds. Aline Sinclair is responsible for the upkeep of all of these roses.
When someone comes to our gardens, we of course have the hybrid teas, the floribundas, the noisettes, the polyanthus, all the old garden roses, the miniature roses, the climbers. Anything you want, we hope we've got at least one representation of, if not more. The individual rose gardens are sponsored by different societies, or if someone wants a memorial garden, then they will make the donation or get the funds together for it. Our landscape architects will draw a plan and we will implement those plans to coincide or to fit in with the rest of the gardens that are already in existence.
Here we are, it's almost November, and there's lots flowering. Now this looks like a familiar favorite of mine. This looks like Lamarck.
That is Lamarck. We're entering the Hudson Heritage Garden, and this is our part of the gardens that is dedicated to old garden roses. So one of my particular favorites.
Well, sure. I grow it over my tool shed, the entry to my tool shed, yes. Lamarck is one of my favorites. And I see some others here that I recognize. Is this Buff Beauty?
That's Buff Beauty. That's one of my favorites.
Gosh, look at that apricot color. That's spectacular. You know, Eileen, if there's one rose that I seem to always recommend to people because of its ease of care and vigorous growth and beautiful bloom, it's New Dawn.
Oh, I agree, Alan. It's hard to beat as far as being an exquisite rose in the spring, and just the very color of it alone is enough to sell it. But New Dawn, of course, was the first patented plant in 1930. So
Really?
That's always a point of interest,
That
I think.
is interesting. I didn't know that about New Dawn.
In the spring, if we had 300 of them, I think I could probably sell every one because of the bloom on this thing. It's just covered.
Of course, the noisettes are the true American class of roses.
Yes, they are. They're certainly a southern classic, I like to think, because of their origin in South Carolina, and then, of course, the heavy French influence on them.
Now, here's blush noisette.
Yes, that's one that I recommend that everyone grow in their garden and shouldn't be without.
Yes, I recognize it because I grow it. It's beautiful.
The fragrance on it is exquisite. Even if you wanted cut flowers, you could cut that and you'd have a whole spray.
Eileen, for beginning gardeners who want to try their hand at roses, what recommendations do you have for them? You
can't go wrong with planting a floribunda.
Like these?
Like those. That's Jean Borner there. That's a particular floribunda. That Sunflare, Sunsprite, any of those, depending on your color, there are thousands out there.
Iceberg.
Iceberg is another one, yes. But you start with a floribunda. You provide good drainage, of course, an excellent soil, such as with good organic matter in it, and provide water and fertilization for it, and I'll guarantee you can't go wrong.
So you've been here how long, Eileen?
I've been here at the gardens of the American Rose Center for 7 years, and we have a very small, hard-working, dedicated crew that makes it all possible, and it's a labor of love for all of us.
I know exactly what Eileen means about roses being a labor of love. When we come back, I'll take you on a tour of my garden for a look at some of my rose favorites.
P. Allen Smith Gardens is brought to you by ProMix, the ultimate quality growing mixes for your potting and planting needs.
This is one of my favorite times of year to have visitors to my garden, mainly because so much is in bloom. The roses are spectacular just now. Just take a look at this one called Lamarck growing over my tool shed. It's just one of about 25 or 30 old-fashioned roses I grow here in my garden. And you can see how Lamarck has been popular for almost 150 years because it's so beautiful. Now let's take a tour of my garden so I can introduce you to a few of the other roses I have blooming here today. I use these roses in lots of different ways. One of my favorite ways to use them is to punctuate an entry with them, as I've done here with climbing White American Beauty. Look how she's filled the entire bonnet of that arbor. Now this rose is also known as Frau Karl Druski. It was introduced in 1901. Now technically an old-fashioned rose is one that was introduced before 1867. That's when the hybrid teas were first introduced. Now I have a lot of varieties in my garden that were introduced before that date and a lot afterwards. One of my favorites is Iceberg. I grow it 3 different ways in my garden. Let me explain what I mean. One way is in a tree or standard form where Iceberg is grafted onto the stalk of a different type rose. This makes a beautiful presentation, and in just a few days this will be in full glorious bloom. Now the climbing form of Iceberg is yet another way I grow it. You see, it's beautiful, supported by twig trellises, and it can grow to quite a height. And the last way I grow it is just in shrub form, in my flower beds. It's a beautiful rose that will bloom right until frost. Now I've got something in the front garden you've got to see. Every week there seems to be a plant in my garden that's a showstopper. And this week it happens to be a rose. It's the old Russell's Cottage rose. Now you see this one was introduced again in the mid-19th century. I grow it because of its incredible fragrance. I just wish you could smell the heavenly scent that these blossoms are giving off. Now it's an exuberant grower. You can see this because it's literally grown up into this elm tree. Now Russell's Cottage isn't the only rose I grow in trees. I also grow Madame Alfred Carrière. She actually blooms just when the foliage begins to appear in the tree. Now many of these old-fashioned roses only flower once. Some will bloom throughout the summer. Russell's Cottage is an example of one that will only flower once, but as you can see, the bloom is worth it. Of course, anyone can appreciate the beauty of a rose, but from a garden design standpoint, I think the thing that I enjoy the most about these old-fashioned roses is that they make such dramatic statements in the landscape, as you can see here. When I chose rose varieties for my garden, I wanted to maximize the bloom potential. So I chose varieties that would start early in the season and bloom right on until fall. There's so many different varieties to choose from. There's a rose for every situation. Some will grow beautifully in containers, others will even take some shade. Now, if you'd like a list of some great ideas on how to use roses in your garden, check out my website. That's pallansmith.com. And if you've been led to believe that roses are difficult to grow, you need to look again. They're a wonderful addition to any garden. Technically, this rose isn't considered an old-fashioned or heritage variety. It's called New Dawn, and it was introduced in the early 20th century. But it has the same effect that many of these old-fashioned roses can have. It's just so beautiful today, I had to share it with you. Your local garden centers and nurseries, as well as reputable mail-order catalogs, are a great source for finding the perfect rose for your garden. Coming up next, we'll take a look at one of my favorite cut flowers, the Gilbert daisy. Don't go away. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome back. In today's show, we're exploring the role roses play in the garden. Earlier in the show, we toured the American Rose Center in Shreveport, Louisiana. It's America's largest park dedicated to roses. And boy, is this a great place to see thousands of varieties at work. And in my garden, roses are hard at work accenting entries, providing enclosure, and delighting visitors with fragrance and bloom. You see, I just can't get enough of them. I also use roses for creating spectacular arrangements. I like to include other flowers like lilies and tulips, salvia, peonies, even zinnias. Well, the list could just go on and on. You see, I really enjoy using what I grow. Now I'm getting these Gilbert daisies all potted up. When I group them, I like to work from one color family. As you can see here, I'm using soft salmons and pinks. Just look at these outstanding flowers. This is from a series called Gilbert Royal by the Flower Fields. When grouped together like this, they look stunning. I've even used them as centerpieces for a dinner party. I simply drop the potted plants into a low bowl and cover them with sheet moss. You should know that these little charmers need a lot of light, and they don't like to be too wet or too dry. Just keep the soil consistently moist. They thrive in average to cool temperatures, so in most parts of the country, they're ideal for growing during the early spring. After temperatures reach 70 degrees or higher, it may be difficult for the plants to flower. If you decide to grow some of these, it's important to know that they should be fed on a regular basis, about every other week during the active growth season with an all-purpose liquid fertilizer. Now, the kiss of death for these plants is crown rot, and the way to avoid that is make sure that the soil you plant them in is well drained. Consistent moisture, but don't let them sit in soggy soil. The other thing is don't plant them too deeply. I always plant them just a little high, maybe about a ½ inch high, so that the soil or mulch doesn't get down in the crowns, because this can induce the crown rot. And occasionally the leaves will develop a little white mildew. This indicates that the conditions are too cold or humid. And speaking of diseases, I'm often asked how I combat pests in the garden when it comes to roses. Well, I'll be honest with you, during those hot and humid summers, it can be a real challenge, but I'm always on the lookout for black spot. Just as the name implies, black spot is a fungus that starts with black spots on the leaves. It can completely defoliate your plants if it gets a good start and goes unchecked. Now, I've never had a rose bush actually die from an infestation of black spot, but it can debilitate the plant and certainly make it look shabby. You see, roses are not all created equal. Some are more disease resistant than others. For instance, some of the popular hybrid tea roses are most susceptible, whereas this old-fashioned rose, Lamarck, has been virtually unaffected by black spot. To better control the spread of the disease, use a commercial fungicide and start spraying as soon as you see the first spots. And I even spray the ground around the plants to kill spores of the fungus. And always try to get the plant completely saturated from the top to the bottom with the spray. Some serious cases of black spot may require several treatments before the fungus is completely annihilated. Since I love roses so much, I have a lot of information on my website. Everything from selecting the most disease-resistant varieties to how to plant them. So check it out, that's pallansmith.com. Okay, heard enough about all those plants in my garden? Well, let's step into the kitchen for a summer salad that's easy to make and tastes great. That's coming up next, so don't go away. During the summer season, I'm usually in the garden or on the go, so my time in the kitchen is very limited. So I'm always looking for recipes that are easy to do, don't take much time, and taste great. A few years ago, some friends introduced me to a salad that's become one of my favorites, and it takes advantage of one of the all-time classic summer herbs, basil. It's called, simply enough, warm spinach and basil salad. To get started, wash, rinse, and drain 6 cups of spinach and 2 cups of fresh basil leaves. I always remove any stems and tear larger leaves in half. Now this recipe is enough for 4 people, but if you'd like to make more or less of it, just remember that it's 1 part basil leaf to 3 parts spinach. Now let's make that warm dressing. In a skillet, combine a ½ cup of olive oil with 3 cloves of finely chopped or minced garlic and a ½ cup of pine nuts. Sauté these ingredients over a medium heat for a few minutes and then add 3/4 cup of diced prosciutto or thinly sliced ham. Watch all of this closely because it doesn't take long for the pine nuts to brown. With the salad greens blended, I'm ready to pour the hot dressing over them. Just listen to it crackle. As the final touch, I'll salt and pepper to taste and add 3/4 cup of Romano or Parmesan cheese. Believe me, summer never tasted so good. Roses play such an important role in my garden, whether they're planted as a standalone or mixed with other flowers. They add so much color and charm, just like these Gilbert daisies. Just look at this container, isn't it fantastic? As you can see, I've chosen flowers all from the same color family, and I've really packed them in. Well, that's it for today's show. I hope you found some things that'll help inspire you to create more beauty in your garden. If you'd like any information on any of the topics you've seen in today's show, just check out my website. That's pallansmith.com. Until next time, from the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.